Hello, this is Trends. It's good to be back. I am Bumi Obano, and as always, we have Moses Omogena, the digital producer here, and he's always telling us what's trending, so I'm sure he has a lot to say, right, Moses?
Yes, I do. When you say it's good to be back, what
yeah,
exactly
I know,
are you
right?
talking about?
There's nothing like taking a break.
Anyways, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So, yeah, what's trending, I know. Basically, a lot is trending as always, but two significant issues are, the hashtag, okay, let me take it one after the other as a teaser. First of all is hashtag Nigeria. Nigeria is said to be on the world map right now for one negative reason and for another a joyous reason. Now, for two reasons, the terrorism and football. Now, let's start with terrorism. We know that here in Nigeria, it's been one tragedy to another. Boko Haram insurgents have, terrorized the country for years now, and the federal government is yet to have its grip on the issue. In fact, people are asking, the collaboration with foreign help and all that, where is that heading? We're yet to find the over 234 girls that were abducted. Next one coming up, hashtag journalism is not a crime. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
I know. Now, the hashtag journalism is not a crime was designed in solidarity for, journalists around the world that have been persecuted, that have been jailed, and even killed in the course of their work for doing their work. Now, of course, we know that journalism is not a crime. It is a noble profession that people should not be victimized about it. Now, that notably for hashtag journalism is not a crime was when 3 AJ staff, Al Jazeera staff, were arrested on the 23rd of June for allegedly, aiding the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt or for acts of terrorism and all that. Even though the Amnesty International says that no one has been able to come up with a single strand of solid proof against this man. But they have been arrested and imprisoned and sentenced to at least 7 years in prison.
7 years,
Peter Grete, Bahir Mohammed, and Mohammed Famin. So that, of course, the hashtag has sparked a lot of worldwide, reactions, conventions, demonstrations, even international meetings. John Kerry, the U.S. State Secretary, had a meeting with Sisi, pleading for the release of this journalist, but Sisi says no. So for now, that he's not going to meddle into the issue. So that, of course, is we're going to be talking about that. That gave us the inspiration for the topic of today. Yeah. So hashtag journalism is not a crime and hashtag Nigeria. And of course, don't forget you can join the conversation by sharing your views with us via Twitter at TVC Trends or comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/TVC Trends and send your pictures and video comments to the trends at tvcnews.tv.
Don't you just love Moses? He has all this knowledge in him.
Yeah, thanks to the internet.
Interesting, isn't it? Well, in recent times, African journalists have had to cope with very difficult environments to operate in. Well, their counterparts in the West enjoy a high degree of freedom. But here they struggle between hostile societies that naturally hoard information and are highly repressive with lots of restrictions on their practice. It has become a norm to hear journalists arrests, clamp down, detention, and ultimately death in the news. The recent sentencing of 3 international journalists to 7 years imprisonment has drawn international rage. That's a lot to take in. But today on Trends, we look at press freedom in Africa. How free is the press? Before we go into that discussion, we'd like you to see this. We'll be right back.
As the world marks World Press Freedom Day, journalists in Uganda are trying to come to terms with the state as violence against media practitioners escalates. According to the country's Human Rights Network for Journalists, trends show that threats to fundamental freedoms are glaring as journalists continue to be harassed and attacked by the very people who are supposed to protect them. Some of the country's journalists narrate how they were brutally attacked by police while on the line of duty.
They forced me to get the camera. I had not changed my tape, and then they took everything away from me. They destroyed it in my face, and then I had no evidence. I had nothing. I was beaten. I was bleeding. I even have a crack here.
Police officers saw me hiding somewhere where I was ready to take the picture from. They pushed me from the stairs up I fell down with the camera. It got broken into pieces.
Journalists working for state-owned media agencies are equally becoming targets of attack by the police, with over 50% cases registered in the last few months alone. International correspondents have not been spared either. The attacks on journalists vary from physical attack to arbitrary arrest and detentions, denying journalists access to news scenes, erasing of journalist materials, confiscation of gadgets, detective and trumped-up charges to verbal threats, among others. The government has also put up a spirited defense against some of the issues raised by journalists.
They have made themselves mainly out of a situation which is not normal and out of competition. Some of them have abandoned professionalism.
The situation has been made worse by the growing levels of impunity, especially due to the weak protection and accountability mechanisms to punish the perpetrators.
Okay, so you've just seen that report, and funny enough, I have some sort of personal experience with, being a journalist and all.
Yeah.
I can remember this one time I was working I was working in a radio station, and then I was a crime reporter, so I was on the crime beat.
Ooh,
and I used to go to the police, the headquarters for Lagos, in that particular city in Nigeria. And I used to go to the headquarters almost every day to go for press briefings, meet criminals and all of that. And this particular day, I think the policemen were drunk, so they were singing and praising a certain political party. I thought that was good, it made for a good story. I think there was an election that was just held in a state. So I recorded that. I had my little midget there, and I recorded that, and I went back to the office, and I talked to my editor, and it made a fabulous story. However, the PRO did not think so. So for days, I was banned from going back there. Wow. It was really interesting, but that just brought the experience back to me about how what you think might be interesting and to the my interest, the public, public interest defense, of course, is actually seen as
I'm happy, yeah, based on your story, I'm happy that did not break you. You're still a journalist that you are today. And whenever I see this victimization, against journalists, it only tells me how powerful, the work that we do, how very critical and how very, significant it is for society. So, but it's left to us, to be broken or not, and we will not be broken.
Oh, how lovely to say that. Okay, joining us to discuss the issue is Babajide Otitoju. He's TVC News Home Editor, and that is really good to have him on the show. And via Skype, we have Abdel Bari Atwan. He's the editor-in-chief of Rai Al Yom, the Arab world's first Huffington's Post-style digital news and opinion website. Gentlemen, you are welcome.
Thank you so much.
Welcome very much. Thanks for being on the show. Okay, so you've heard my wonderful story, about being a journalist, but would just describe the typical African journalist.
Well, the typical African journalist is very determined. He operates in a very difficult environment, and he knows he has to deliver. The average African journalist is not insured. It's not insured, yet it takes risks that even journalists who are insured would not want to take. The average African journalist takes delight in doing the job because that is all we have. That is what drives us. We signed up. We know that this is not a job that delivers millions into our accounts every month, but we know that this job has to be done. Somebody has to fight the repressive governments that we have all over Africa. And African journalists are so determined, they take big risk.
All right, let me ask you this, Jide. When they say that the press should be free, freedom of the press, what exactly, based on your level of experience, what exactly do you think that should entail?
It means that the Constitution should actually protect the journalist. The Constitution of that country should affirm the independence of the media. Across African countries, because majority of the African countries are ruled by dictators who know the value, I mean the strength,
Okay.
the power of the media.
Okay.
So they want to do their best to ensure that the press is not free in their countries.
All right, let me bring in Barry into the conversation now. Barry, thanks for staying on. As the editor-in-chief of this Arab World's Huffington Post-style digital news magazine, is the press in Africa truly free?
I don't think so. I think the impression we have outside of Africa, yeah, there are very few free press which can explain what is happening. Simply, as my colleague said, most of the African regimes are suppressive regimes, and this actually reflected on the media. We know that many African journalists, many Asian journalists, many third world journalists were either abducted or killed simply because they expressed their view in a very free way. So I think Africa has a long way to go. I mean, African journalists in particular have a long way to go, like many of the third world countries or places, to reach the professional standard, the free press, which all of us are hoping to see in our part of the world.
Okay, that's good.
All right, Barry, let me ask you this. You know, oftentimes when journalists are being arrested, you know, or victimized, the usual reason is that they're working against, you know, the state in question.
The problem is, if you want to fight corruption.
Continue.
Yeah, I was just asking.
Sorry,
Can you hear me, Barry?
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes, I hear you.
Yeah, I was just asking that, you know, journalists across Africa that are usually victimized, you know, and, you know, persecuted for their work, the reason, you know, being given is that they work, you know, anti the government in question. So that being said, at what point can we draw the line between a journalist, you know, performing his social responsibility to the public and at the same time not working against the government in question? At what point can we draw the line?
The problem is, what is journalism? Journalism is to expose corruption, to expose the corrupt people, to criticize the government, to criticize the inefficiency of the government ministers, those people, high-profile officials. So if we don't do that, it's not journalism. It is not actually freedom of expression. We are not here to please the rulers. But, you know, we have to draw the line. You are right, because we want to survive. We don't want to be killed. We don't want to be persecuted. We don't want to be imprisoned. So it is really the most difficult job which we are facing, all of us, whether in Africa or Asia or any part of the third world. So to be honest, I am very full sympathetic with my African colleagues who work very hard and try to imitate the free press in the West in particular. So, and in the end, they end in jail, they end prosecuted, they are sacked. So it is a very, very, very hard struggle in Africa or in Asia or other parts of the third world. So we have to continue. We shouldn't give up at all. We have huge responsibilities in our shoulders, and we have to serve our community. We have to actually guide our countries to the first world. This is our duty as a journalist.
Yes. Now this brings me back to journalism in school. You know, when you talk about journalism being the fourth estate of the realm and objectivity, fairness, all these things. Now listening to what Barry just said, how will you react to that? Moses asked the question about drawing the line. So in as much as we're supposed to, you know, expose corruption, we're supposed to do all of that, but we're supposed to do it in an objective manner.
Well, the question I will ask is objective by whose standard?
I never really got my lecturer to answer that question.
Because you see, the reality is, out of 54 African countries, press freedom is only present in 10 countries. That's bad. Even in Nigeria, what we have is partial freedom. We don't have freedom of the press in Nigeria, not yet. And what the African leaders do not realize is that the countries that are making progress are the countries where there is press freedom. You talk about Japan, you talk about Spain, you talk about Italy, you talk about America, you talk about the United Kingdom.
So tell us why.
Because the press in those countries work with the government to bring about growth and development. Where government needs to buckle up, they write about it. And because those governments are representative and responsive, they take a cue from what the press has published or what they put on TV. They now go to get those things done. They are like the means through which the government gets to know what the people want. So the government knows that the press is very important. That's why in the UK, for example, the Prime Minister of the UK cannot call the CEO of BBC and say, look, I don't want that story, take it down. The law has been so designed in such a way that the BBC has freedom from interference from government. Yet, it is a corporation run with government funds. It is a company put together, you know, by the state, using taxpayers' money. In this part of the world, the president of that country would want to ensure that, no, it is what I want people to hear on BBC radio that they will get to hear, or what I want people to see on BBC TV that they will see.
But talking about that, some of the arguments for press restriction and against press freedom, in quotes, say that what we have, the modern day media or journalism in general, are partisan. So they attack the government if whatever party is sponsoring that station or that newspaper is, you know, in the opposition party. Or they dance to the tune of the person paying their bills. For example, if an opposition party owns a particular station, they'll probably give more airtime or paper time or paper space rather, to that opposition party, irrespective of what the other party is doing. So even that in itself, the press is being accused of being impartial. So their attack on this government is just a cover-up to serve this other party. So how would you respond to that?
It depends on who is saying this, because really, I know that in America, for example, in an election year, newspapers decide. They endorse candidates. The New York Times will say, Obama is our candidate, and they will do an editorial and give 101 reasons why they think Obama is the best man for the job. They are allowed to do that.
But are they allowed to do that? After all, we shape, in a way, we are supposed to shape the opinion of the masses because we are the information. Yeah, the internet is there now, but we give out information. Now, if we're saying we're standing for this man, you're manipulating the public that supports you and listens to you and, you know, respects your view to also go for the person you're supporting. No, that is if you assume that the people are robots. What the media can help the people to do is to make informed choices. So when you say that, oh, Obama is the best man for the job, and you have to validate that, you have to give your reasons. The reader will read through the editorial and ask himself, oh, they said Obama can do this. And then you can actually even investigate some of those claims. You have a right to do it. What the press will only help you to do is to make that informed choice. Okay. That is the thing. So it is not such a bad thing to say, oh, this is the position that I've taken. Of course, we know that proprietorial interest is it's an issue in media, in the media in Africa and other parts of the world. But the point I'm making is that people set up media houses for one reason or the other. But at the end of the day, what the media should be guided, and the media should always do its best, you know, to promote public good. And I think, by and large, even in Africa, this is what the media is doing.
All right, let me bring in Barry to this. Now, Barry, if you can hear me, we know that the government or government institutions are one of the biggest restrictions, you know, towards journalists and, you know, press organizations. Now, some social critics argue that whether we like it or not, we cannot really be free, you know, as journalists from the government. I mean, they get to, you know, approve the airwaves that we transmit. They get to regulate our licenses. They get to, you know, even give us finances for this. So now, can we, in spite of this that happens, you know, it's working against the government, so to speak. It's like they see it as biting the fingers that really feeds you. So can journalists really be free from the government?
No, they can't be free from the government. You know, we are a third world countries. We gained our independence just 50 years ago in most of the third world countries. We were under imperialism. So we cannot actually jump, you know, say about 300 years in order to be like the BBC or ITV or Sky News or others. We have to be patient. I don't mean that we should wait another 300 years to be like them. No, the time changes, the technology changes, but we have to be, honestly, we have to be brave, but intelligent at the same time. We don't want to be prosecuted. We don't want to be killed. We don't want to be jailed. We want to actually do the job. And we have to do a lot of sacrifices. And we have to be extremely patient. And so I know the governments, they got everything. They got the money, they got the police, they got the guide, they got the instructions, they got everything between their hands. And we want to snatch this from their hands gradually in order to serve our community. Definitely our generation will sacrifice more in order to pave the way for the next generation of journalists who will actually hopefully do better than us and have maybe a freer, freer press and more tolerant governments. And yeah, that's what we are hoping for. But it doesn't mean that we should give up. No, it is a hell of a struggle. Our next generation, our younger people are watching us, and they want us to be their guide for a free press. So it is a difficult challenge. It is a huge task in front of us, and we have to. You know, I'll tell you from my own experience. You know, these governments are very coward. To be honest, they are scared of every word we say, and that's why they persecute us, because they know that, you know, we are powerful, we got the means, we got the brains, we got the urge to do better for our societies. We have to be patient, we have to work hard, we have to be tolerant in a way or another in order to serve our community. It is not easy job. I never said it's an easy job, but we have to do it.
All right. Okay. At this point, we've been talking about journalism and press freedom in general, objectivity here or there. But let's take a break now and we'll come back to continue talking. Welcome back. We still have Babajide Otitoju in the house, and we also have Barry Atwan with us. But before we continue the discussion, we have a report for you to see about the Egyptian journalists, or the journalists in Egypt that are currently facing a 7-year or more jail term. Watch this.
3 Al Jazeera journalists who have been jailed in Egypt since December have been sentenced to prison for aiding the Muslim Brotherhood.
Peter Grest, Mohammed Fahemi, and Bahar Mohammed were convicted of terrorism-related charges. The judge also handed down 10-year sentences to 2 British journalists and a Dutch journalist who were not in Egypt and were tried in absentia.
Peter Grest, Mohammed Fahmy, and Bahar Mohammed have been held in Cairo's Tora prison since December on charges alleging that they had conspired with the Brotherhood, spread false news, and were threats to national security. According to Mashable.com, Grest and Fahmy were both sentenced with 7 years and Mohammed with 10 years, an additional 3 for possession of ammunition, a charge stemming from an empty shell he had as a souvenir.
And does any of this make sense?
It's absurd. It's disgraceful. These men, the only crime they've really committed is journalism.
And the trial itself, I mean, seemed pretty much like a farce.
Absolutely. I mean, the kind of things, the evidence that was brought against them, they ran a video by an entirely different company, Sky News Australia. They used the BBC podcast as evidence. They aired part of a documentary on Somalia, also by the BBC. It had no links whatsoever to this Al Jazeera crew.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry spoke with Egypt's new president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Sunday. Kerry says they spoke specifically about Al Jazeera journalists. Following the sentencing, Kerry said he was disturbed and felt that Egypt was taking steps backward in their transition. Despite their meeting, El-Sisi says he will not interfere with the justice system. According to CNN, there are currently 167 journalists imprisoned worldwide. Reporters Without Borders ranks Egypt 159th out of 180 countries for media freedom. According to Filipino network GMA, 134 journalists and media staff support were killed on assignment last year, most targeted deliberately. Syria is considered the most dangerous country for the press, followed by Iraq and the Philippines respectively. News shows across America are now fighting for the release of prisoners. CNN's Christiana Amanpour held a sign reading #FreeAJ_Staff. Now her campaign has created a wave across social media, making Free AJ Staff and Journalism is Not a Crime trend on Twitter. BBC journalists and colleagues from other news organizations held a 1-minute silent protest outside the new broadcasting house in London Tuesday. But despite all the public sentiment, the verdict hasn't changed. Fahmy, with his curled fist, said, "I swear they will pay for this," following the verdict. While Fahmy's mother wept, his brother Adel says they will appeal the verdict, but added that he has no faith in the system, saying it is corrupt.
Having seen this, Barry, in your opinion, was the judgment fair?
Yeah, you know, in Egypt, we don't have an independent judicial system. And it was a kangaroo court, to be honest. It wasn't a proper trial. You know, to send a journalist for 10 years jailment, it is honestly, it is a barbaric ruling, a barbaric punishment. Okay, you don't like them, you can kick them out of the country. Despite that, I disagree with that. Journalists should have the time, the space to conduct their job in a very perfect way. But we know that Egypt, there was a military coup, and this military coup, actually, they don't want to have a free journalism, a free expression. This is the problem, and there is some sort of, you know, disagreement between Egypt and Qatar, the owner or the financer of the Al Jazeera. And so those people, those journalists are paying the price of these differences or animosity between Qatar and Egypt. And they are a scapegoat, they are victims, and they should not treat it that way. Most of them are professional, they conduct their job in a very objective way. They are not part of any party in Egypt or anywhere in the Middle East. So I believe what happened is appalling. And we, as journalists, we should stand by them, and we should put pressure on the Egyptian government to release them as soon as possible.
All right, Barry. Jide, obviously there was a case raised against the journalists, so there was some sort of crime that they were supposed to have committed. But do you think that there was any, was that even factual in any way, talking about the judgment and the so-called crime they're supposed to have committed?
Well, it's strange, really, that this kind of thing is happening in Africa. But what the Egyptians have done, the Ethiopians have been doing for years. Under its anti-terrorism law, many journalists have been jailed. For that reason, between 2007 and 2012, at least 49 Ethiopian journalists fled into exile because for merely talking to the opposition, you could be tried under the anti-terrorism law as a journalist, and then you go to jail. So it's strange that African leaders could be behaving in this way, because you see clearly that because they have a lot to hide, and because they know that the press is very powerful, they want to cover their backsides. They want the bad things that they do unreported. So they would rather keep the press in the restrictive environment that it is now, so that the culture of silence, apologies to Zimbabwean human rights activist Elnino Sisulu, so that the culture of silence can continue. This is what African leaders, a lot of these African leaders want to see continue. But as journalists, we hold it a duty to continue to do our job, you know, to continue to be faithful to our conscience, to do our job diligently and faithfully, and as real patriots.
All right. At that point, Moses, I'm sure the online community is buzzing and they want to talk.
Now, very first tweet comes from Diko Coker, and he says, African press is certainly not free as democratic governments are essentially neo-dictatorships slash a hybrid of dictatorship and democracy. And Abayomi Adisa says, Africa has a long way to go in terms of press freedom. Hashtag Nigeria's Secret Service arrested a man for posting pictures on Twitter. And he also went further to say, it's almost impossible in Africa. Government hates journalists because they expose their shady deals. And Abayomi again says, until Africa is cured of corruption, hashtag press freedom might never be possible on the continent. African government versus press season 1. And Kuba Katam says, worried about the hashtag press freedom in the Czech Republic. Can you be an objective journalist when the Minister of Finance owns your newspaper? Interesting.
Very interesting. I think we've talked about that. But
yeah, in-house suppression.
But Jide, and I want to know some of your personal experiences. And we've been talking about different things now, but let's talk about, personal experiences. Give us instances, cases that, you have experienced some sort of press restriction during your practice.
Yes, in the 90s, I worked for the news magazine and Tempo. And at that time, we had a military regime. So we practiced what we call guerrilla journalism. At a point, we didn't have an office. So we were operating from underground. We filed our stories and the magazine got published underground. So they were looking, the military authorities were looking for us. I did a story titled Army Panel Clears Coup Plotters. The idea was to show that the so-called 1995 coup never happened. And here were Nigerians who were, if we weren't careful at that time, who were going to be killed. So we exposed the fact that it was a phantom coup. And I was in Lagos when someone called to say, look, they are looking for you. You wrote this story, they are looking for you. Better find a way to go and hide somewhere. And within 2 hours, Kunle Ajibade, who was the editor of the news at that time, had been picked up and locked up in Shangisha. Later on, he was transferred to the Directorate of Military Intelligence. And then a kangaroo military tribunal sentenced Ajibade to jail, along with Obasanjo, along with Mekpaeda, along with the army officers who were picked up, in connection with a coup that never existed. So after that, I fled to Kano, and I remained in Kano for some time. I wasn't going to the office. So one day I went to the office and I saw my secretary, and my secretary showed me a card. I looked at the card. I didn't know what to say because there were just 2 lines under the name. So I called my boss in Lagos. I said, they gave me a card that some people came to see me in the office. He said, describe the card. So I described it to him. He said, oh, the people who went to check on you in the office were military police. He said, you know that you wrote this story. If you make the mistake of allowing these people to catch you, you go to jail. So I fled to Jos. I remained in Jos for 3 months. After 3 months, I thought, well, this is sufficient time for these people to have forgotten about me. I returned to Kano. So I was in Kano. After a few days, I was going to the office. I would stay in the office for a few minutes and come out. It was just for a young man at that time. It was difficult for me, to live with not doing my work. So one day, as I walked into the office, I saw 2 men just standing in front of my secretary's desk. And they were asking my secretary, Shine Wonako, in Hausa means, is he the one? At that time, I had four tables. The other table was for the other reporter. So the table in front of the girl, the secretary, was for the other reporter, Laiwola Adeniji. He works with Chevron now. And the woman said, Bashibane, he's not the one. The reason why she said, oh, it's not the one, was because she recognized that those two fellows had earlier visited me. I've gone to my office to tell her that we were drinking past, that they just wanted to see me. So it occurred to her that, oh, perhaps these guys were lying.
They knew you, they should have known.
Yes, if they knew me, they shouldn't have asked, is he the one? So I went straight into the inner office. Immediately she denied I wasn't the one. I went straight into the inner office, and behind my office was this huge market in Kano called Yankura Market. And now I opened the door. I fled back to Jos. I left my clothes, left everything. I went to Jos to hide.
All right, Jide, I'm afraid you can't finish that story. And let me draw in Barry once again to this. Now, you saw the report earlier, knowing that 3 journalists are presently detained and held in custody for doing their work. Now, bearing that in mind, the Egyptian foreign minister says that the constitution allows the freedom of the press and even endorses it. Now, weighing these two scenarios, does that not make a mockery of the constitution in Egypt? What are your views and thoughts on that?
Well, to be honest, yes. To find freedom of expression in the constitution is one thing, and to look at the practice, it is completely different things. For example, one of those journalists was accused of being helping and supporting and a member of Muslim Brotherhood, and he was a Christian. So how can a Christian actually be a part of a terrorist organization or Islamic radical organization as they characterize it? So, yes, the constitution are not respected in most of the third world countries. I'm not even, maybe not all of them. They don't respect any kind of constitution and consider it as a piece of paper. They can throw it anywhere, they can tear it apart anytime. So this is the problem we are facing. Those journalists actually were, as I said, a scapegoat, a victim, because the Egyptian government would like to put pressure on Al Jazeera satellite channel, which is really supporting the demonstration in the street of Egypt and taking the side of the Muslim Brotherhoods as a victim simply because they were removed from power. So the Egyptian government want to terrorize Al Jazeera. They want actually to put pressure on the Qatari government, and that's why they abduct them and to send them to 7 to 10 years imprisonment. This is absolutely unacceptable, and it is very harsh and unjustified completely. So what can we do about that? Okay, we can write, we can demonstrate, we can show our objection, but the government wouldn't budge at all unless the Qatari unless there is a reconciliation between the two governments, the Qatari government and the Egyptian government. When we reach some sort of reconciliation or see this reconciliation, I think those people will be released immediately.
With the criticism and pressure from the international community, do you think the present administration will step into the sentence?
Yes, definitely, it will help.
So will Al-Sisi and his government step in to probably block the sentence or cancel it or something?
Yes, he can. Yeah, but the problem is, we are witnessing a very difficult era in Egypt. Just about a week ago, they sent 183 people to death sentence in Egypt. What kind of court? In a few days, they managed to issue their judgment about them, and so they could be executed anytime. This is not actually a proper judicial system. 183 people were charged and tried in less than a week, and then they were sentenced to this. What kind of justice is this? So this kind of justice also is applying to the journalists. There is no independent judges there. There is no independent judicial system. So if the Sisi decide tomorrow to release them, he can release them without any problems. And this is the difference between the advanced world and the backward countries, like in our part of the world. This is the problem. There is no independent judicial system. Imagine that. How can we rule without the independent judicial system? If there is no independent judicial system, there wouldn't be a freedom of expression. There wouldn't be actually stability in the country. If justice is the essence for any rules since millions of years. If there is no justice, there is no stability. There is no humanity. There is no freedom of expression. Nothing at all. So unfortunately, it was a political trial.
All right,
it was
Barry.
political charges. Nothing to do with the journalists.
All right, Barry. Very, very passionate there. Jide, I'm sure you want to react to that.
Yes, I think that it is clear that Sisi wants to send a message to Al Jazeera and other journalists. Don't forget that even our own reporter was denied accreditation and told that she could no longer work in Egypt. What was her crime? She was just reporting about the demonstrations on the streets of Cairo, you know, and other Egyptian cities. They want to muffle the voice of the press. They know that the press is powerful, and these are dictators that we are dealing with. What these African dictators want to do is to destroy their own country before they leave power. And the reality is that the people are left powerless when these people have succeeded in chasing all the journalists out of town.
Okay, Jide, we're running out of time. I hate to cut you there because I was really enjoying that. But I just quickly want to know, how can journalists be protected and ensure objectivity amidst all these threats?
It is when we have good governments at every level, journalists will be protected because the right laws will be made, and those laws will protect the journalists. That way, the practice of our protection will be done with fidelity.
All right. Okay. Barry, I also want to address the same question to you. How can we protect journalism and still ensure objectivity, even with all these things happening right now?
First, journalists, we should stick together. We should actually fight for our rights. We have actually to stand against these regimes, and we should insist on independent judicial system and the good governance. If we do that, if we have that, I think, you know, we'll be protected. Personally, I was listening to my colleague when he talked about the problem he faced. I received about 4 to 5 death threats simply because I was writing the truth. I was expressing myself. I was talking about corruption. And, you know, it never frightened me at all. You know, the Ku Klux Klan, the American terrorist groups, they sent me a death threat to my house in London. Said, we can reach you and we can kill you. You know, and you know those people who were responsible for the death of a lot of, you know, American Africans simply because of their color. So, but I never get afraid at all. So we have to be brave. We have to be patient. We have to sacrifice. This is the only way to prevail.
All right. Thank you very much, Barry. And thank you also, Jide, for being a part of the program. It certainly has been very interesting, and a lot of things have been said here. A continent with an alarming rate of uneducated people seriously needs information to develop. If the press is continuously gagged this way, getting quality information to move the continent forward might be far-fetched. Remember, the conversation continues online, so keep those tweets coming. Bye for now.